What is up, Media Mail Gang? It is Katie with KateyReads, and today's video is something that has been requested by a lot of you, and I'm actually going to make this into probably a 2 or 3 video series because there's just so much to cover, and I don't want to do a huge info dump and have you guys have to watch a bunch of things that you already know to finally get to the things that you want to know. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing condition and descriptions and how those kind of tie in together. So a question I frequently get is, how do I condition the book? And that really heavily depends on the platform that you're using. Amazon's conditioning is totally different than eBay's policy for conditioning. So in this video, I am strictly going to be talking about eBay. I'm not going to be talking about Amazon conditioning and when you should or shouldn't put notes in and things like that. I may do a video for Amazon, but right now I'm just going to strictly focus on eBay because that is what a lot of my following has interest in, and that's where a lot of my following sells their books. So I'm going to dive right into it. I am going to put up little screenshots here, and in the description I'm going to put a link to eBay's conditioning policy. If you read eBay's policy, it tells you how to condition a lot of different things or put descriptions in for different things based on categories. You really have to read that. I am going to summarize it, but you really need to read it. I don't work for eBay, so I can't be the end-all, know-all. If you put something in wrong and you have a dispute or claim, you're going to have to follow along with whatever eBay says. First, we're going to talk about brand new and like new. So brand new and like new, I literally never use on eBay. If you were to use one of these two, this is the situation that I would recommend using one of these two. I'm reading notes, so if I look down, that's what I'm doing. Brand new is going to be new, obviously, unread, perfect condition, no flaws whatsoever, no bumps, has the dust jacket, and it may even be factory sealed. Now you'll see this commonly with textbooks. Brand new condition book is going to be completely flawless. You're likely to not get a lot of these, but if you do get them, you need to make 100% sure that it is completely flawless, that it still has the manufacturer's sealing if that's applicable, and maybe even some documentation proving that it is new, just in case you got an INAD claim. And an INAD claim is an item not as described. Next is like new. Like new is going to be new but read, and that's literally what eBay says in the policy. It's a new book, but it's been read, it's been used before, but barely. I would compare it to maybe like gently used type of clothing, to where it looks like no one even opened the book up. No creases, no tears, obviously no writing, the dust jacket is there, all of that type of stuff. So brand new and like new are really tough to separate from each other. I've definitely come across some brand new books. I know that they're likely brand new books, but I always condition down a notch. That's my personal business model, to underpromise and overdeliver with that. Does it prevent me from maybe making a sale? That's sometimes the argument with conditioning, like you need to condition properly in order to make your sale. I don't know that that necessarily deters my sales or not. I wouldn't have the data because I have no way of speaking with the buyer on why they chose to pass over my listing for someone else's. Next up is very good. And very good is kind of like this middle child that a lot of people use, and probably for the wrong reasons. Very good is, it doesn't look new. You definitely know it's not a new book. It's been read, but it's in excellent condition, meaning there's no damage, the dust jacket looks good, there's no tears, no creases, da-da-da. I'll discuss that verbiage here shortly. There's no missing pages, no writing, no markings, all of that. So very good is kind of like this awkward medium. I rarely use very good. If I have a book that's like really excellent, pristine condition, I will use very good. Sometimes like new, but I have to be super confident in its condition, because you also have to take into consideration that when it gets to the buyer, it still has to look the condition that you listed it at. And sometimes when packages get to buyers, books can get beat up. So very good is typically the top tier that I list at. Again, just my personal preference, my personal business model. Good and acceptable. Good and acceptable sometimes are tough to differentiate from. Good has been read but is overall in okay condition, minimal damage, no tears, no holes, no writing. So good condition cannot technically have writing in it according to eBay's policy. So really all these conditions, so far we've talked about 4 different conditions, all of them state in eBay's policy that you can't have writing, highlighting, marking, stamping, any type of markings inside the book. So that's something to take into consideration, because other platforms like Amazon are different. A lot of the books I list are in good category. Finally is the acceptable condition. This is obvious wear, possibly torn pages, creases, damages on the cover, a missing dust jacket, damage on the dust jacket, writing inside, highlighting inside, the binding could be damaged, the hinges could be damaged, but the book is still intact. Like the book isn't falling apart, shredded to pieces kind of thing. It's still legible. The writing and highlighting and things like that can't deter from being able to actually read the book. So essentially acceptable is strictly for reading purposes, and that's pretty much it. I sell acceptable all day, every day. I think some people literally just either want a book for nostalgia, want a book strictly to read it, and then they'll do something else with it, or they want it for their collection. Maybe it's a certain edition that they're willing to hang on to until they can find a better condition of that first printing book, whatever it may be. Now, in all 5 of these conditions, I want to mention one thing. It doesn't say anything about ex-library or ex-libris. Ex-library you can sell. I sell them often. I typically don't take the stickers off or the dust jacket covers. Sometimes dust jackets will be wrapped in like a plastic covering to protect the dust jacket. I don't take any of that stuff off. I literally sell it as is. I don't do any repairs to books either. So ex-library, make sure that you're taking that into consideration too with your conditioning. I would probably never list a book greater than good being ex-library, because very good, like new, and brand new, you need to have a pristine dust jacket, and you won't have a pristine dust jacket if you have that little white in the corner. Let me see if I have one here. This right here, this is an ex-library book, and then the dust jacket doesn't have a protector over it, but you understand kind of what I mean by the markings on it. I would never list this greater than good. That's just my personal opinion. So another thing I want to mention with all 5 of these conditions, absolute no-no is books with mold and books with water damage. I would never list books that have those 2 components. Water damage is like the page gets deformed, there's extreme staining from it, and mold is just nasty. I would never sell something I wouldn't want to buy and own myself. So with mold and extreme water damage on books, what I typically do is I disassemble the book and recycle it. I just want to also mention that as well. Make sure you're looking for water damage, stains, and mold. Make sure you understand the difference between foxing and mold. I will talk about foxing next when I discuss verbiage and things that you need to be using in your book descriptions. And finally, when it comes to conditioning, when you have modern and vintage books, typically you're going to have a book conditioning option in the item description on eBay. When you start getting into antiquarian, a reminder, antiquarian is 100 years or more. When you start getting into antiquarian, you're going to want to use the antiquarian book category. And at that point, the conditioning is kind of out the window because it's an antiquarian book. Typically, those never are in good or better condition. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are. And in that case, you would want to make sure that's in your title and in your description, and you're using strong keywords to get the right interest and buyer. But overall, antiquarian is typically in rougher condition. So I think that's just why eBay doesn't even offer book conditioning once you choose the antiquarian category. So I just wanted to touch on that as well in case any of you are dabbling or come across antiquarian books that you try to sell. So in terms of value for your book, I get a lot of questions about that. I look up eBay comps, I do Google searches, I do check competitors like Biblio, Abe Books, Cherish. I really think that a Google search gives you such a wide spread. You can buy subscriptions for certain websites that help you with vintage and antiquarian books. I used to have a subscription to one of those websites. I didn't find it worth the cost for me, especially because I don't deal in antiquarian exclusively. In the future, who knows? But for right now, the cost didn't make sense for me. I don't really want to expand more on how to figure out value for your book beyond that because I'm not really certified in any type of book conditioning, so I don't have any formal education with that. I'm an average Joe just like you guys are, trying to make a buck off of a book. So I would just encourage you to use your resources, look at other platforms. You can even, I've looked at comps on Mercari too, just to kind of get an idea. So Amazon, all of those resources to figure out value for your book. Another thing to take into consideration with valuing your book is that your dust jacket is going to be like 90% of the value of your book, because the dust jacket, especially with older books like 50 years or older, are typically tore up or missing. So I would say dust jacket is really, really important, and you're going to want to make sure to note that in your description, that it has the dust jacket, and not necessarily in your title, but you'll want to put it in the description and make sure you're taking pictures of it as well. So next I'm going to talk about some book verbiage, some book lingo, and I'm going to share what I know. If you know more, you can definitely drop it in the comments. This is what I use on a consistent basis when I'm listing books. So hardcover goes by HC, which you could put HC in your titles. Paperback is PB, and you'll put that in your title as well. Mass market paperback is MMPB. Mass market paperback is going to be your small paperback books that you see probably at the airport or in the checkout line at the grocery store. It's literally mass marketed. So those type of books. Next is the term loose leaf. Loose leaf books are going to be typically found with textbooks, but you might find them with some nonfiction religious studies as well. They are the type of books where they have 3-hole punch in them and you would have to put them into a binder. You can definitely sell those as long as there's no missing pages. I typically sell them with a binder just to kind of add some value to the buyer. Next is going to be spiral bound. So the spiral bound books are going to be books that are just literally spiral bound, like a spiral bound notebook. I do indicate that in the description. It's not necessarily something you need to include into the title. Another thing to keep in mind is the term study guide and workbook. They're kind of interchangeable. Some study guides have no area for you to write inside. Workbooks, typically all it is areas, blank spots for you to write in. So kind of keep in mind with those. I do sell study guides and workbooks, sometimes even them being completely filled out, which That ain't none of my business. You do you. But completely filled out study guides and workbooks I have sold. It's just not very common, because just because it's completely filled out doesn't necessarily mean the person who used it had all the right answers. So the best selling ones are the ones that are completely blank. I think some professors will even question some students that purchase them. Like at the beginning of the semester, they'll want to see that they have a completely blank study guide or workbook. So another thing is dust jacket. I've talked about that quite a bit so far in this video. So a dust jacket goes by the short DJ. You will want to include that in your title in instances where it's a rare book or an older book. The $500 book that I sold from the 1900s, I did put DJ in the title because none of the other books that sold on eBay had the dust jacket. And my dust jacket, while it was extremely worn, it was there in whole. So, you know, sometimes the dust jackets, you'll have like just barely some of the pages hanging on. So it's important to include the dust jacket if and when you do have it, even if it's bits and pieces. Another book lingo item is BCE, which is book club edition. So while you have your first editions and your possibly first printings, you also have book club editions. And book club editions are typically not mass produced, and typically there is a certain club that the publisher was working with or the author was working with. Sometimes book club editions are exclusively sent to libraries only. Just kind of depends on the book and depends on the publisher. Sometimes even depends on the author. So keep that in mind, BCE, book club edition. Another thing to keep in mind with your titles and your descriptions is the edition. First edition, second edition, third edition. I will do a different video on how to look up those things. Keep in mind the year. You need to know how to see the year and how to tell what is the original copyright year and what is the year of the printing that you have. So that kind of goes over some of the book wording and lingo that I'm aware of and that I use. Again, if you have any other suggestions or other things that you use or want to share with others, please drop it in the comments so that everybody can see it. Maybe you might teach me a little something too. So next I'm going to talk about descriptions for modern books. Modern books would be, in my opinion, 1970s, 1980s, and newer. So for modern books, I look at, as far as conditioning, for modern books, I look at bumps and scuffs on the edges. So what that means is Anne Rice would be considered a modern book. On the edges of the book, I look and see if there's any scuffs or bumps or creases on the edges of the book. Because if you think about it, you're putting this book on and off a bookshelf, and it might scuff or get bumped while on the bookshelf. In this case, there is a small bump on the spine of the book, and I would indicate that in the description. The bottom almost always has some type of damage just because, like I said, it's going on and off of a bookshelf. Creases are also very common in modern books. Creases, we're just going to use Anne Rice for all my examples because she's right here. Creases kind of look like this. You can tell that the spine has been cracked open. This book has been loved and read multiple times. So that's something you'll want to indicate in your description, that there are creases on the spine. Some people don't want that. Some people absolutely love that. It is all about preference. And then finally, you'll want to indicate folded or torn pages. You'll want to indicate missing pages. You'll want to indicate writing or highlighting. You'll want to reiterate all the things that pretty much justify why you condition it, whatever condition you do. So if you condition it good, you'll want to say no missing pages, no writing inside, minor bumps on edges, scuffs on the spine, minor creases, overall good condition. And just kind of tie it up with a bow like that. When you're shipping out books, you'll want to make sure that you're not putting books too close together to where they're going to be bumping or moving around, because that can create folded and torn pages as well. And in my book journey, in the very beginning when I first started selling books, I did have that happen a couple times where some people gave me some bad feedback because the book got bumped and damaged during transit. And at that time I offered no returns. Again, I was a baby reseller, just getting into this more on like a full-time basis. So I kind of learned my lesson with that. And now I offer free 30-day shipping just for the sole reason of if they don't like the condition that they get the book in, I can mitigate negative feedback and I can get the book back and, you know, resell it with a different condition note and hopefully package it a little bit better the next time around. So finally, I'm going to talk about a category that I just started getting into. So bear with me. I know that some of you that follow me have a lot of book knowledge and have been selling vintage and antiquarian books much longer than I have. I really appreciate your support, and I know a lot of you want to teach me things. I am slowly dipping my toes into this. If there are videos or knowledge that you want to share with my followers as well, please leave it in the comments. I'm going to share what I know and my experience. So yeah, I'm going to share what I know and my experience. So as far as antiquarian books, you're almost always going to have foxing. Foxing is where there is brown or tan spotting or stains on the outside pages. So like the outside pages of the book or on the inside pages of the book. It looks significantly different than mold. Mold is going to, I mean, we all should know what mold looks like, but mold is going to be like typically black and very grimy. Foxing just kind of looks like it's spotty, it's brown. Sometimes it's only on the inside cover pages, sometimes it's all throughout the book. Sometimes it's only on the outside pages. It just kind of depends where the book was stored, how old it is, and how it was taken care of. Next, with vintage and antiquarian books, you're going to have leather bound, cloth bound, and just general hardcovers. I don't know all the material types out there. Like I said, I am not an expert. I'm not certified in antiquarian yet. And I don't know all the details, but what I do know based on my experience and what I've been learning with selling antiquarian books, cloth bound books typically have like fraying on the top and the bottom. So where a paperback would have like bumps or little dings on the spine, with cloth bound it's almost like it's frayed, like, you know, a pair of jeans gets kind of frayed. It'll be on the top and the bottom. So those small things I put in the description as well. I go really knee deep in my descriptions with vintage and antiquarian because your buyers are going to be collectors and or people that purchase books to repair them. So I would put as much that makes sense for you and your time into the description. It also, I feel, helps prevent from negative feedback or returns. You're also going to potentially have situations with leather-bound books where there's going to be chips on the outside of the book or on the spine. You'll want to indicate that. Chips are just literally like if there was chipped paint, like there's chipped material on the book. Okay guys, that's it. That's what I have for this video. I feel like this video was really long, so I'm sorry. I hope you got some value. I hope I wasn't just rambling. I hope some of it makes sense. I hope some of the wording and verbiage makes sense as well. So I will see you in the next video where I'll be discussing the anatomy of a book, front, back, spine, all that fun stuff.